You want to know how an empire collapsed? It started with a flat tire, a broken black man, and a blonde woman hiding in his trunk. That's not a joke. That's the moment the powerful blinked and lost. What looked like an act of kindness turned out to be a declaration of war. If you've ever wondered how quickly your life can turn from forgotten to historic, stay right here. Because this isn't just a story, it's a warning, a lesson, and a spark. But first, leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts. The engine was still humming when the black sedan rolled up behind him. Then came another. Then one more. 3 men stepped out in tailored suits, their shoes too clean for real trouble, but their eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "You sure you didn't see a blonde woman pass by here?" asked the tallest, leaning so close Darius could smell his cologne, the kind worn by men who never lose. Darius didn't flinch. His hands were still on the wheel. "Like I said, sir, I'm just here changing a flat. Haven't seen anyone." The man didn't believe him. He wasn't supposed to. They stared him down like he was already guilty, like they were trying to sniff out the truth with their noses instead of facts. But after a few long seconds, they turned back to their cars. As they pulled away, Darius finally exhaled the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That's when a voice came from the trunk. "Are they gone?" And just like that, the game began. She crawled out like a ghost from a grave. Blonde hair matted, designer joggers streaked with mud, her body trembling not from fear but from fury. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't hidden me." Darius didn't answer right away. He just stared at her through the rearview mirror, his grip on the wheel tightening, not from anger, but from understanding. Because this woman, whoever she was, had the kind of desperation in her eyes that can't be faked. She wasn't some runaway teenager or careless heiress. She was hunted, tracked, the kind of woman with secrets expensive enough to get people killed. And for some reason, she had picked his car, his trunk, his moment to hide. Darius hadn't rescued her, not really. He had made a choice. One the world would say was reckless, but sometimes reckless is just courage with bad credit. 3 hours earlier, Darius Thomas had been sitting in the ghost of his dream. A tech office stripped bare by bankruptcy. The final eviction notice sat next to a stack of unpaid invoices, mocking 7 years of grit. 7 years of building a company that investors ran from the moment they learned the founder was black. They didn't say it. They never do, but the silence in those boardrooms screamed louder than any slur. He'd fought it, he'd pitched, he'd begged, and in the end they still handed his dream to someone with lighter skin and a louder pedigree. Now here he was in a beat-up car with a woman crawling out of his trunk like a plot twist. "I'm Alexander Winters," she said, offering her hand. "Call me Alex." Darius shook it. "Darius Thomas." She looked at him. "You're calm for someone in a lot of danger." He glanced at the rearview mirror. "I've been in danger my whole life. This is just a new flavor." "Those guys. They work for my father." She pulled a flash drive from her pocket. "Richard Winters. Know the name?" Darius didn't blink. He knew the name. Everyone in tech knew Winters Enterprise, the billion-dollar machine that gobbled up startups and spit out empty shells. "I know him," Darius said, his voice like gravel. "He crushed my company last year." Alex didn't apologize. She didn't blink either. "You're not the only one." "This drive? It's got everything. Fraud, bribes, data leaks. He's been buying off regulators and sabotaging competitors, yours included." Darius didn't speak. He didn't have to, because suddenly, this wasn't just a ride gone wrong. This was destiny knocking. Loud. Darius's phone buzzed. He glanced down. A vehicle theft alert. For his own license plate. "You're officially a fugitive," he said, showing her the screen. "Your father just made us car thieves." Alex's eyes widened. "He's going to find me." Darius started the car, surprised when it actually turned over. "Not if we move first." He took a sharp turn off the main road, tires crunching gravel like bones. "Do you really think you can outrun him?" she asked. "No," he said, "but I can outthink him, and that gives us time." The car bounced down an old logging road, overgrown and forgotten, and in the rearview mirror Darius saw her watching him, not like a stranger, but like someone seeing hope for the first time. Why her? Why now? Why him? The questions hung in the air like ghosts with nowhere to go. Darius had nothing left to lose, but now he had something to protect. Not just her, or the drive, or the dirt-stained hope in the back seat, but the chance to finally fight back. They drove in silence for a while, headlights cutting through the encroaching dark like truth through propaganda. And somewhere in that quiet it hit him, the irony all his life. He'd been told to keep his head down, play the game, wait his turn. But the moment he stopped listening was the moment the world turned in his favor. That's what kindness really is. Not weakness, not foolishness, but rebellion dressed in grace. You still think one choice doesn't matter? That helping a stranger can't change anything? Then keep watching, because what Darius did next didn't just protect a runaway. It detonated a lie so big it brought an empire to its knees. This is your moment to choose too. Hit subscribe, because the next turn in this story will make you question everything you thought you knew about justice, power, and what it really means to win. Keep going. The fire's only just started. The dirt road curved like a question no one wanted to ask. When they finally pulled up to the cabin, the silence felt almost sacred, like the trees were holding their breath. Alex unlocked the door with a rusted key, one she had stolen years ago during a family summer visit she barely remembered. Inside, the air was thick with dust, but the structure still stood. A fireplace, a table, a couch older than either of them, no cameras, no GPS, just wood and shadows. Darius stepped in slowly, feeling the weight of forgotten plans hanging in the corners like cobwebs. "My father bought this land for a development project," Alex said quietly. Then he forgot it existed. Darius didn't laugh. He didn't need to. Because this place, abandoned by greed, was about to become the front line of a different kind of war. As the cabin warmed from a fire that Darius built with shaking hands, Alex handed him the flash drive. It looked ordinary. Plastic, scratched, small enough to lose in a pocket. But the moment it plugged into his laptop, everything changed. Folder after folder opened like confessionals, wire transfers, legal contracts disguised as donations, spreadsheet trails that curved into bribes. One folder labeled Operation Phoenix made Darius freeze. He clicked. There it was. Tech Vision. His company. A memo dated 2 months before his investors ghosted him. Initiate competitive liquidation via reputational threat. That wasn't market strategy. That was sabotage. Further down, emails between Winter's executives plant rumors of financial instability, leak client data anonymously, force panic. Darius sat back, breath heavy. This wasn't paranoia. It was a business plan. And he hadn't just been collateral damage. He'd been the target. Not because he was unqualified, but because he was inconvenient. Because he didn't fit the mold of who's allowed to succeed. Alex sat across from him, staring at the screen like it was showing her father's face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know it went that far." Darius didn't answer. Not out of anger, but because silence was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. "When I found those files," she continued, "I knew I couldn't stay. He told me we were building a legacy. But all I saw was wreckage." Her voice cracked. "Do you know what it's like to find out your family name means destruction?" Darius finally looked at her, eyes hard, but not cruel. "Yeah, I do." That moment wasn't about blame. It wasn't about forgiveness either. It was something deeper. Shared ruin. She had money. He had nothing. But they both carried the same weight now. Betrayal by blood, betrayal by trust, and the decision of what to do next. Darius stood, walking to the window. Snow had started to fall lightly, softening the edges of the forest. His mind raced. He could leave her here. He could hand the flash drive to a reporter and walk away. But he didn't. Because deep down, he remembered what it felt like to scream into the system and hear nothing back. No one had helped him when TechVision collapsed. Not the lawyers, not the regulators, not the investors who'd toasted him at gala dinners. "You want to know why I'm still helping you?" he asked, voice low. "Because no one helped me. And if we don't fight back together, then we're just letting the game reset without changing the rules." Alex nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. Darius hadn't forgiven her, but he had chosen her, and that meant something. He pulled out an old notebook and flipped to the back page. A name. A number. Maya Rivera, the only lawyer who had ever believed him, even when she couldn't save his company. He stared at the number for a long time before tapping the screen. 1 ring. 2. Then her voice, calm, clipped, skeptical. "Darius?" He smiled for the first time in hours. "Maya, I need you." She didn't ask why. She just said, "Where?" Because sometimes, when institutions collapse, justice doesn't start in court. It starts in quiet conversations, in cabins, with people who remember who you are after the world forgets. That night, the plan wasn't clear, but the alliance was, and that was enough to begin. Miles away, in a penthouse with floors that cost more than most mortgages, Richard Winters threw a whiskey glass across the room. It shattered against the marble. "You lost her," he barked at his head of security. "She's a spoiled girl, not a ghost." The man stammered. "Sir, she has help. Someone picked her up. We have a partial plate." Richard grabbed the photo his team had printed. Grainy, low-res, but sharp enough to see Darius's face. "Who is that?" The guard cleared his throat. "Darius Thomas, former CEO of TechVision." Richard stared at the photo, then burst into laughter. "That loser? My daughter picked him?" He tossed the photo onto his desk like it was a receipt for a bad dinner. "He's nothing, a footnote." What Richard did know, what he would never understand, is that history is built on footnotes, and sometimes those footnotes carry fire. This section of the story is a mirror. Look into it. If you've ever been dismissed, discarded, or doubted, this is your moment to remember that silence is not your destiny. Betrayal doesn't end you, it reveals you. It clarifies who you are, who you're not, and what you'll do next. The world is full of empires built on silence, intimidation, and selective memory. But all it takes to shake the ground beneath them is a voice that won't back down. One voice, one file, one choice to act. If this chapter made you think, share it, subscribe, because the louder we get, the harder it is for power to pretend we don't exist. And in the next part, you'll see exactly how quiet people prepare for war. Maya Rivera didn't walk into the cabin. She entered like gravity had shifted in her favor. Her presence didn't demand attention, it focused it. 42, sharp-eyed, and seasoned by courtroom wars no one televised. She wore a plain coat, scuffed boots, and a crossbody bag loaded with truth. When she hugged Darius, it wasn't tender, it was mutual recognition. Two people who had been burned by the same fire, now standing in its glow. Years ago, she tried to help him when no one else would. She couldn't save TechVision, but she could still finish what the court never started. She opened her laptop, placed her glasses on her nose, and said the words that would change everything. "Let's find out how deep this goes." And just like that, the resistance wasn't theory anymore. It was a woman with a Wi-Fi hotspot and a mission. Zoe Chun arrived the next morning in a rideshare vehicle that couldn't track her real destination. She wore a hoodie, sunglasses, and a look that could short-circuit a firewall. Former cyber analyst for a federal agency, she'd left after realizing her work was being used to protect the people it should have been exposing. When Maya called her, Zoe didn't hesitate. "You've got proof?" she asked. "We've got motive too," Maya replied. That was enough. In less than an hour, Zoe had mapped Winter's network like a subway system. Lines leading to politicians, fake charities, offshore accounts. "You're not fighting a company," she said. "You're fighting an ecosystem." Darius watched the blueprint unfold on the screen, shaking his head. "Then we dismantle it piece by piece." They weren't rebels hiding in the woods. They were engineers reconstructing ethics from broken code. The goal wasn't revenge, it was repair. They spread out around the cabin like mission control. Maya and Darius built a legal case targeting public fraud, contracts awarded through bribes, falsified safety inspections, digital paper trails of influence for sale. Zoe focused on cyber forensics, tracking every IP hop and falsified document route Winter's enterprises had used. And Alex? She became the key, because her father, in all his arrogance, had never trusted his IT department. He'd created a shadow system. Master credentials coded for family access, lifetime access. She hadn't used them in years, but when she typed them in, the gates opened. It was like unlocking a vault with a birth certificate. "He always thought we'd need an escape hatch," she muttered. "Turns out, I'm using it to pull him out of the building." What Winters never understood was that you don't teach someone to climb the ladder unless you're ready for them to kick it down. Darius sold his last possession of value, a gold watch gifted by his mother when he opened TechVision's first office. The cash funded hardware upgrades, secure networks, burner phones, and travel expenses. Alex called an estranged aunt and admitted everything. "I may never be part of that family again," she said, "but maybe I never really was." Zoe restructured her life overnight, quitting all freelance gigs and moving into a studio across town with a server rack louder than a motorcycle. Maya called in every favor she had left, even from people who hadn't spoken to her since law school. Nobody got to keep their comfort. That was the price. When you go after the powerful, you have to empty your pockets and fill your spine, because the first thing they'll take is your stability. And if you're not willing to lose it, you'll never have the leverage to win. The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday. Zoe cracked into an internal email loop labeled Vendor Management Exceptions. Buried inside was a flagged contract. Winter's enterprise billed the government double for a municipal fiber rollout that never happened. Fake specs, fake photos, real money. "It's enough to bring in the feds," Maya said, "if we build a chain of related fraud cases." The files grew. A judge flagged for accepting campaign donations through his wife's foundation, a state representative with ties to a shadow pack funded by Winter's shell companies. The dam was no longer leaking, it was creaking. Darius stared at the monitor. He built a house of mirrors. Maya replied, "Good, then we'll let the truth shatter every wall." This wasn't a leak, it was a reckoning disguised as a folder tree. Late that night, as thunder rolled outside and the cabin dimmed to candlelight, Maya closed her laptop and looked at the three faces around her. Darius with his quiet rage, Zoe with her restless hands, Alex still carrying the cost of her name like a stone in her pocket. "You all understand what this means, right?" she asked. "This isn't a lawsuit, it's a declaration. Once this goes public, there's no pulling it back. They'll come after us, legally, financially, personally." Darius didn't hesitate. "They already did. This time we're hitting back." Maya leaned in, eyes sharp. "Are you ready for war?" And in the silence that followed, they all knew the answer wasn't in words. It was in the work already done, the files copied, the passwords cracked, the history reclaimed. They weren't ready for war. They were already in it. And the next move would make the world feel it. You're not watching a fantasy. You're witnessing what happens when ordinary people weaponize truth against polished corruption, when they use skills built in silence to scream through systems designed to mute them. This part of the story isn't about heroes. It's about the moment someone realizes they don't need to ask permission to fight back. If you've ever wanted to believe the system can be changed, don't wait for permission either. Subscribe, share this, start conversations that make the powerful sweat. Because the resistance doesn't start with noise, it starts with readiness. And that next hit? It's coming. The conference room looked like it had been dipped in gold. Velvet banners, polished floors, camera crews lined up like they were filming history. Richard Winters stood at the podium, grinning like a man auditioning for sainthood. "Today," he began, "we announce the acquisition of Garner Technologies, our largest, most ethical partnership to date." The press clapped, half of them already writing puff pieces in their heads. He had no idea what was coming. Because while Richard puffed his chest and polished his brand, Maya, Zoe, Alex, and Darius were 3 blocks away in a secure server hub, fingers flying, signals rerouting. At exactly 10:03 a.m., Zoe hit enter. Every screen in the room, behind the stage, in the media pit, even personal phones, blinked, glitched, and then shifted. Graphs vanished, emails appeared, receipts, contracts, voice memos, and a new banner unfurled, "The Real Winter." At first there was silence, a short, breathless silence. Then came the buzz. Journalists' phones vibrated in unison like an alarm had gone off. One reporter gasped, another cursed under their breath. The big screen behind Richard no longer bore his merger presentation. It displayed a forwarded email titled, "Destroy TechVision, proposal approved." Then another, "Wire payment to Judge X, use dummy foundation." Then a video, his CFO laughing about how they love acquiring black-owned companies because they fold easier when you pressure their investors. Richard turned to see his name on the biggest display, but not in lights, in shame. "What is this?" he snapped, stepping back. The room was unraveling. People weren't just watching, they were recording, tweeting, screen capping. And suddenly the man who had spent decades hiding behind NDAs and paid-off audits couldn't mute a single word. That's when Alex's video began playing. It wasn't polished, no music, no edits, just a woman in a gray hoodie sitting at the edge of a worn wooden desk, staring into the lens like it owed her the truth. "My name is Alexandra Winters," she said. "I'm the daughter of Richard Winters, and everything you're seeing is real. I didn't run away because I was scared. I ran because I finally understood what it meant to carry this name. My father built an empire by destroying dreams, and I helped, even if I didn't know it." Her voice cracked once, but she didn't flinch. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for restoration, for every business he crushed, every entrepreneur he smeared, every public trust he bought and buried. I am not my father's legacy. I'm the consequence." Then the screen faded to black. Richard spun around, searching for someone, anyone to regain control. "Cut the feed!" he yelled. But the screens weren't controlled by the venue. Zoe had hijacked the entire network through an overlooked vendor contract. "Get my daughter on the phone! Get legal on the line!" But no one moved. All eyes had shifted to the back row, where a familiar face stood quietly in a simple suit. Darius Thomas stepped forward, followed by Maya Rivera. Richard's eyes narrowed. "You!" he sneered. "The failure!" Darius didn't blink. "The failure who exposed you." Richard laughed, sharp and dismissive. "You think this'll bring your little company back?" Maya stepped forward and pulled out a folder. "This isn't about your merger. It's about criminal liability and public fraud." Richard laughed again. Until Maya reached into her jacket and revealed her badge. "Maya Rivera, Special Advisor to the Department of Justice. You remember them, right?" The laugh died in Richard's throat. A few security guards reached for their earpieces, but it was too late. The auditorium doors opened, and federal agents entered, quiet and steady, as if they were attending a meeting, not making an arrest. "Richard Winters," one said, "you are under arrest for tax fraud, public corruption, judicial bribery, and conspiracy to obstruct federal oversight." The room didn't gasp. It inhaled. Richard froze. No words, no performance. Just raw, silent calculation on a face that had spent a lifetime spinning stories. The cuffs clicked like a punctuation mark at the end of a long, fraudulent sentence. He tried to glare at Darius one last time, but the moment was already gone. Because power doesn't end with a bang. Sometimes it ends with a whisper and a pair of hands behind your back. Outside, the press had already turned the cameras on the agents walking Richard out. "Is it true your daughter turned you in? Did you order the sabotage of minority-owned companies? Are you cooperating?" But Darius and Alex stood in the hallway behind the noise, watching quietly. They didn't high-five. They didn't celebrate. Because the mission wasn't over. "I thought I'd feel more," Alex whispered. "More what?" Darius asked. "More. Triumph. But all I feel is tired." He nodded. "That's what justice feels like. Not loud, not clean, just honest." She looked at him. "Did we win?" Darius thought for a moment, then shook his head. "No, but we cleared the field. Now we build." And that was the real point. The arrest wasn't the end. It was the start line, the space cleared by fire, ready for something better to grow. You just watched a man fall. But the lesson isn't about his downfall. It's about the courage it took to make it happen. If you've ever wondered whether exposing corruption is worth the risk, look again. Power doesn't crumble because it's challenged once. It collapses when people decide silence is no longer an option. And now it's your turn. Share this story. Speak up. Act out. Because the moment you stop being afraid of the noise, you realize something loud. Truth is louder than any empire pretending it's untouchable. Keep watching. This revolution isn't over, it's just getting organized. Horizon Technologies didn't start in a boardroom or with a venture capital check. It was born in a two-room office above a laundromat with furniture borrowed from bankruptcy auctions and ambition built from ruins. Darius didn't want to rebuild TechVision. That chapter was closed. He wanted to build something different. An incubator, a launch pad, a place where people like him didn't have to explain their worth before being believed. Horizon was created for the dreamers the system ignored, for the entrepreneurs dismissed with a smile and a rejection email. Within its first year, Horizon had funded 6 startups, all led by founders from communities the industry pretended were invisible. Each success wasn't just a win, it was a warning to the gatekeepers, "We're not asking anymore." Darius hadn't just reopened the door, he'd bulldozed the wall and started handing out blueprints. Across the city, in a building with her mother's maiden name on the lease, Alexandra launched something no Winters had ever imagined, a foundation that didn't protect power but redistributed it. The Winters Foundation was born from the ashes of her father's empire, but instead of PR optics and photo ops, it operated like an apology with teeth. Grants, mentorship, legal aid, angel funding for marginalized founders, especially those targeted by Winters' enterprise. She met with victims in person, looked them in the eye, and said the words no one ever expected from someone who shared the Winters name. "I believe you, and we're backing you." At first the media called it guilt money, but as the results came in, real businesses, real impact, they changed their tune. Alex wasn't rewriting the family name. She was building a new one, brick by brick in a neighborhood her father never drove through. On the anniversary of the takedown, they met in a new space. Clean walls, bright light, the energy of something honest. Zoe arrived first, laptop under one arm and cold brew in the other. Maya followed with legal documents in hand and sarcasm at the ready. Alex stepped in quietly, looking at the nameplate on the door with a half smile. Horizon Technologies' legal office. Darius was already inside, reviewing pitch decks from new founders. "Remember that night in the cabin?" Maya asked. "The cold, the files, the fear?" Zoe nodded. "And the squirrels. Don't forget the squirrels." Laughter filled the room, light but real. They weren't reminiscing for nostalgia. They were honoring the beginning. Because revolutions don't always wear camouflage. Sometimes they wear tired sneakers, a hoodie, and a heart that refuses to sit still. They toasted not to victory, but to survival with purpose. The foundation funded its 50th startup that quarter, a sustainable housing project led by a Latina architect from Detroit who had been turned down by every major firm because of cultural mismatch. Horizon backed 3 more companies, one developing prosthetics with recycled materials, another building educational software for low-income schools. These weren't unicorns, they were systems changers. And for every success, Darius felt something shift, not in his ego, but in the landscape. These founders weren't asking to be seen. They were creating spaces where they couldn't be ignored. The old rules said ownership was reserved for the elite, but now, each founder was a brick in a house they were never meant to enter, and now they owned the land. Quiet justice doesn't get headlines, but it builds foundations no storm can shake. A national podcast interviewed Darius one morning as part of their New Leaders series. The host leaned in, voice smooth and eager. "What's your secret? How did you go from broken to bold?" Darius paused, not for effect, but for truth. "The secret is we stopped asking for permission," he said. "We stopped waiting for someone to validate our ideas, our pain, our vision. We moved without applause. We chose action over acceptance." The clip went viral, not because it was flashy, but because it cut to the bone. People weren't hungry for motivation. They were starving for a map out of the maze. And Darius had handed them a compass forged from failure. Later that night, he stood alone in his new office, looking out over a city that once chewed him up and expected him to disappear. Alex joined him, 2 mugs of tea in hand. "Ever think about how it all began?" she asked. "A trunk, a flat tire, and a choice," he said. "A choice to trust someone the world told me not to." She nodded. "And a choice to burn everything I inherited so we could plant something better." Darius raised his cup. "To the choices that built the future." Because the real win wasn't the courtroom drama or the headlines or even the fall of a man like Richard Winters. It was this: access, fairness, a system that no longer asked who you were before deciding if you deserve to be here. If you've been told to wait your turn, to follow a path already paved for someone else, stop, start building, start backing, start believing. This story isn't a blueprint, it's a spark, a call to action. Because sometimes the biggest revolution isn't loud. It's a fair shot, whispered in the right ear. Pass it on. Someone's waiting for permission you were never meant to need. In a sterile room painted beige by bureaucracy, Richard Winters watched the interview on a small wall-mount television. No remote, no volume control, just closed captions and the quiet hiss of a worn-out speaker. Darius Thomas filled the screen, not as a victim, not as an enemy, but as a leader. "We stopped asking for permission," he said again, that same line echoing like a sermon in the back of Richard's skull. The guards didn't comment. They'd seen this before. Former titans in state-issued sweatsuits, still trying to mentally run boardrooms they no longer owned. Richard leaned back on his metal chair, lips tight, hands trembling just enough to notice. His mind spun not around what he'd lost, but around who had taken it. "My daughter," he muttered to no one. "My daughter and a nobody." Even in chains, he clung to the delusion of superiority like a man clinging to perfume after his suit has been taken. Some people wear arrogance like cologne. Even in cages, they think they still smell like power. A week later, his last appeal was denied. The papers arrived, folded, stamped. Final. No headlines, no hope. His lawyer, younger than his own assistants once were, laid the documents on the table with the weariness of someone used to closing doors. The Winters Foundation, he added, almost as an afterthought, just announced its first wave of grant recipients. It's already outpacing half the legacy charities in growth. Richard barely blinked. "She's using what little of my money is left to fund people like Thomas?" The lawyer didn't flinch. "Actually, sir, she's working with Mr. Thomas. She's the foundation's director." The silence that followed wasn't disbelief. It was recognition, not that he'd lost, but that the world was moving on without him. The gavel didn't just fall. It echoed, and no matter how many times he replayed it in his mind, it never landed in his favor. Back in the city, Alex sat across from Maya at a quiet cafe, both women nursing untouched tea. Outside the window, a group of students rehearsed spoken-word poetry, their voices loud enough to break through the glass. "Did we do enough?" Alex asked, her eyes never leaving the street. Maya looked at her, not with judgment, but with that lawyer's stare that cuts through self-doubt like a scalpel. "Enough for what?" she asked. "To undo it," Alex whispered. "The damage, the name, the legacy." Maya took a slow sip before replying. "You don't undo legacy with words. You do it with action. And you've already done more than most ever try." Alex nodded slowly, but her hands didn't stop shaking. Because even when you burn down a house, the ashes carry your last name. Redemption isn't a headline, it's a pattern worn and earned over time. That night, Horizon held a small celebration. Not a gala, not a spectacle, just people standing in a room they built together. Founders, dreamers, doers. Darius stood in the center, holding a glass of something fizzy, looking like a man who still couldn't believe the view from this side of the storm. 3 years ago, he said, "I was sitting in a car with a flat tire and a trunk full of risk, and I made a choice, not because I knew what it would lead to, but because doing nothing didn't feel like an option anymore." Around him were faces that once only dreamed of being seen, now running teams, raising capital, filing patents. "Success," he said, "isn't a summit, it's a platform. And the real climb begins when you decide who gets to climb with you." They raised their glasses, not to him, but to each other. Later, on the balcony, the city sprawled beneath them like an open map. Alex leaned against the railing, shoulder to shoulder with Darius. "You never told me," she said. "Why'd you help me that day? You didn't know me. You had nothing to gain." Darius didn't answer right away. He watched a traffic light flicker in the distance, green turning to red, movement pausing just long enough to reset. "Because kindness," he finally said, "is the first rebellion." She smiled at that. "And surprise," he added. "Ha! That's how hope shows up. Not loud, just uninvited." They didn't need to say more. Because some answers don't come in speeches. They come in the silence that follows a decision that changed everything. This story didn't end with an arrest. It began with a choice. One man in a broken-down car made a decision not to look away. One woman born into privilege decided to burn her safety net. One friend offered her skills, another offered her truth. And together, they rewrote the rules. If this story stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Don't just watch. Build, share, subscribe. Let this story be more than entertainment. Let it be a signal. Because you don't need power to start a revolution. You just need to choose differently. And if enough of us do that, the systems built to silence us won't stand a chance. Let your choices echo. The world is listening now. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts.